kind of bread you're making. If you're making, say, a sourdough bread, that can take takes much longer. Sourdough bread, in essence, is bread that's made with natural yeast. The first bread that was leavened was made this way. Before, they made flatbreads like tortillas and such that did not have a leavening agent in it. But what happened was someone in Egypt, or so the story says, left a bowl of grain porridge out too long, and it fermented and it rose, and then they baked it. And it was much nicer, it was much more leavened than what they were used to, and that was the first leavened bread, and that's what could be considered sourdough bread. It's just the natural yeast. It's the way people used to make bread. For sourdough bread, it takes longer because it's natural yeast. You need to first collect the yeast and make a good yeast culture. And then after that's ready, after that's very strong, you mix it into your dough, and you have to let the dough wait. You have to let it ferment, you have to let it spring up, get bigger. You have to shape it, then you have to ferment it again before putting it in the oven. But when you do that, because you're using sourdough, a natural culture, it's more acidic. So it breaks down the gluten a bit more, so it's actually a bit more digestible. And I think it's a little tastier too. Because it's a bit sour, it makes your mouth water a bit, like when you're eating a sour candy, but far more healthy. Well, I've been doing it for a while, so I don't think it's difficult. But I also don't think it's very difficult for, say, the home baker to do, or even like professional bakers. All that you need to do to make a sourdough starter, and there's a lot of different recipes out there, but all you really need to do is mix flour and water together, and then wait, say, like equal amounts flour and water together. Just leave it out for 2 days until it gets bubbly. Then after that, you just pour out half and then put more flour and water until it's very bubbly, and it can just about double in size within 6 hours. It's very easy. It's actually a little faster here because of the climate. It's quite warm in Indonesia, quite lembab as well. I think sourdough it's not as popular as it is in America and Europe because it's more traditional to those countries. But I think it's getting more popular here because, one, people are coming from Indonesians who've lived abroad are coming back home to Indonesia, and they remember the bread they had abroad and they want to have it here. But also, it's because it's a little bit healthier. In America, there's a lot. We have a long history of bread in America. But what's really popular nowadays is sourdough, but a really specific kind of sourdough. It's like kind of the San Francisco style sourdough, so quite sour, but also very dark, baked very dark. So you get a really deep caramel flavor, which I would say in Indonesia would be considered gosong, burnt. And in Indonesia, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. I would say bakeries like, say, Bo Bakery is doing a lot of, I know because I work for them. Bo Bakery is doing a lot of sourdoughs, a lot of traditional sourdoughs. Not quite as dark as American style, but I think very good for the Indonesian palate and very digestible. Also, a lot of what I see people doing is like donat kampung and things like that. And that's, people make at their house and such, which I personally think can be considered artisan bread. I think those are very popular and very enak. very popular. We first had like a big way, before our bread was kind of boring, like before 1993 or so, our bread was quite white and quite soft, kind of like sari roti. But then in the 1990s, we had a resurgence of more hard European breads. And then just recently, we've really been getting into like rye breads and like really dark breads. And it's really increasingly popular. I know when I first started in the industry, there was a lot less people baking. Be an artisan baker, just start baking. You know, I started baking as a home baker. I started baking because my mother is a doctor and she doesn't bake because she's a doctor and she needs to spend her spare time sleeping. So what I did was I made myself a cake by myself from a cookbook, and it was better than anything my mom could make. But that's all you need to do. You just need to start baking. It doesn't have to be something difficult, more difficult or advanced like sourdough bread. It can be something easy like roti manis or a cake or kue. I think baking is fun. I think it's compelling. I think the more you bake, as with anything, the more practice you have, the lebih latihan you do, the better it is.